There we are. Okay, so welcome everybody to this next session this morning. As I said, really hope that you've been enjoying it so far. I will be moderating the chat, so please put any questions for Nicky into the chat so we can have a good discussion. I'm absolutely delighted that Nicky Mann is here to talk to us, or she might give you a little bit of insight into her story. But for many years, she was actually a portfolio delivery manager for some very big companies. And you'll have to tell us, Nicky, when you started your training to be a nutrition advisor. But she launched her own nutrition business last year, right in the middle of the pandemic. So a big hands up to you and well done for doing that. So I'm going to kind of hand over to her, but we're absolutely delighted to have her here and to talk about kind of how nutrition helps with your mental well-being. So over to you, Nicky. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen right now, which is that one I want to share, and put it on there so you can see it. How are we doing? That's right, isn't it? There we go. Hello, everyone. Thank you for choosing this session, because you did have a choice. So thank you for that. As Joe said, yes, I'm Nicky. In no small part due to Joe and Work Avenue, I did manage to turn my career around during lockdown. I'm still very much building up my new career, but very much enjoying it. Too many years in project and portfolio management and big corporations. So now I find myself sat in my own home working from here on Zoom or face-to-face. I'm a nutrition advisor now. I work with clients to produce a healthy, balanced diet to support their nutritional needs. Sometimes for weight management, not always. Generally, it's for physical health, but I really do believe that a healthy body is a healthy mind. I know it's a cliche, but more than that, I also believe that you can influence your mental well-being through your diet. So that's that. The only reason I put this slide in is because I like the cartoon. So inwardly digest it and I'll move on. So while you're looking at that, we are going to get back to basics. The cartoon, I suppose, says that. This is based on scientific evidence, largely, and we'll talk about that in terms of mental well-being. There is a lot of opinion based on the internet. This is as large as I could make it fact-driven. So here we are. This is where we get into the meat of the presentation. So there is an absolutely strong and undisputed association between poor diet and an increased risk of physical disease. We will be looking at a balanced diet, so you'll understand what the converse of that is. Poor diet is associated with physical disease. In particular, it leads to obesity. 66% of men and 57% of women in this country fall into the either overweight or obese category, which is not a good thing at all. That is known to be associated with, excuse me, increased risk of high blood pressure, cholesterol, heart disease, stroke, and certain cancers. So there's an undisputed link between diet and physical health. The links to mental well-being are at an earlier stage, but there are certainly associations with the things I put here. So energy and blood sugar levels, we're talking about sugar highs and sugar lows, affecting your mood, even if it's just being hungry. We all recognize that. Gut health, this is an emerging area of research in terms of the particularly the inflammation of the gut and how that affects our mental well-being. Stress may affect our gut bacteria, but we have to have a healthy gut to help fight stress. So we need to nourish our guts to feel calmer. I think that's about as far as the science has got, but there's definitely something in them. And I watch this space because I'll certainly be looking closely at that development. Blood health, oxygen in the blood, and again, the blood sugar levels. And then we're going to introduce, because they provide the condition to produce the neurotransmitters, the mood chemicals. The main ones we're going to talk about today, or the only ones we're going to talk about today, are serotonin and dopamine. You've probably heard of both of them. These are the neurotransmitters, so they send messages from your body to the brain, so they help us in terms of how we're feeling. Serotonin is associated with well-being and calmness, and it's the feelings of happiness. Serotonin certainly regulates our mood. And dopamine is the motivation and focus. It's the happy one. It's an important part of our brain's reward system. So when we get that feeling, you know, we get a reward. So we get it from sugar. Don't get me wrong, but there are other more healthy ways of getting dopamine.
Nicky, I've had a couple of people saying they're having trouble hearing you. I'm not, but can you either, I don't know, put a volume up or...
I can do that.
Okay. I think you're... yeah.
Okay, is that any better for people?
It's certainly fine with me, but... Okay, let's try with that.
That's really high. That's really high. Okay.
Thanks.
Hopefully that's better. I was in the middle of talking about dopamine and just getting on to, there is some link that low levels of dopamine might cause depressive symptoms, e.g. a lack of concentration, i.e. being the motivation and focus chemical. So that's kind of setting the scene. We'll be looking at that in a bit more detail. But back to where I started, a healthy balanced diet is achievable and will help maintain a healthy body and a healthy mind. I'm absolutely a great fan of that. I believe strongly in that. And I know I certainly feel better when I eat a healthy and more balanced diet, and I'm obviously more able to understand what that is now. And hopefully in the next 15 minutes, you'll be able to understand a bit more what that is. Healthy eating and maintaining healthy weight has benefits. Obviously, development and growth, absolutely critical. We've already talked about the risk of certain diseases, and you look, feel, and perform a lot better. Yeah, I always forget this slide builds. I don't know why I did that. I hate animation. So anyway, but I do like that. What it says, think of your body as a car. You wouldn't knowingly fuel your petrol car with diesel. So why would you knowingly put the wrong nutrients in your body? Okay, moving on. So it's all about the balance, a balanced diet. This is only this slide concentrates on energy balance. So this is what we measure in calories. Calories are a measure of energy. So it talks about energy in and energy out, basically. So if you have your energy in being the same as that which you consume, you will have an energy balance. You'll have the right amount of energy for your bodily functions and for your physical exercise. If you're on the positive side, that is energy consumed is more than the energy that you actually use. Obviously, you'll eventually gain weight. There's an increased risk of disease, as we've already talked about, and you will experience discomfort. Negative balance, the opposite of that. So you take in less than you actually need. So the body's not getting what it needs, obviously leads to tiredness, low mood, and eventually weight loss. I'm not going to spend much more time on that because that is pure calories. Calories have a limited value, but you have to have a balance, and that's the most important thing is the nutrients you consume within those calories. And so we're going to move on to talk about that now. So energy intakes, this is how you get your energy in, the opposite side of energy out, and all all your nutrients and all your energy is derived from these three things. They're called the macronutrients: carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. There is one exception, and that's alcohol. But alcohol is a source of energy, but it isn't a source of nutrients. So the main source of actual energy, and the energy we use, is carbohydrates. It's the body's go-to source of energy. These energy for organs, physiological function, and all our activity. Not surprisingly, we're told to eat the highest proportion of that. They break into two types. There's the simple carbohydrates, which are very small numbers of sugar units, if not one, and they're sugars, effectively. They're found in fruit and milk and all the sugars that we add to our food in terms of sucrose. The other type are complex or starchy carbohydrates, which we tend to call them now. They're made of many sugar units. They're much more difficult to digest, so therefore they hit the blood sugar a lot slower. So they're much better for gut health. They also contain fiber. We'll talk more about fiber later. Proteins from your meat, fish, eggs, and all plant-based sources are really, really important. They're the building blocks in terms of physical. They repair, they grow, they maintain tissues. Enzymes and hormones, all of these are proteins that we need. Most people overstate the amount of proteins we need. It's round about 15, but 20% will do you no harm. But they're really important. It also, you need proteins for the brain and tissue as well as any other tissue. In terms of the fats, they are really important. 35% is quite high, but this isn't just added fats. The picture's a little bit more misleading. You'll get a lot of it from your protein sources as well, but they are really important. You can't underestimate the importance of fats. They transport fats, the vitamins that are transported in your fats, so fat-based vitamins. So they are vitamins A, D, E, and K for your information. It's a reserve source of energy, helps your skin, and provides protection to organs. So all three of those really important, and that's where you get your energy, which is probably a good thing. So how do you make sure you do this? This is the government guideline. It's called the Eat Well Guide. I think it used to be called the Eat Well Plate, which I think they changed because it gives it somehow, if it's called the Eat Well Plate, gives you some kind of idea that you ought to be eating all of this in one go, which clearly you don't. So they now call it the Eat Well Guide, which is probably a better name. Concentrate on the oval in the middle. That is your diet, basically. That's what you should be eating, and the proportions. If you're eating those kind of proportions, you will almost certainly get your macros right. So starting on the yellow section, which is the basically the complex carbohydrates, as we call them, or the starchy carbohydrates. Basically, you should be having 5 portions of these a day, and we should be keeping it whole meal as much as possible. There are favourites within here for both physical and mental health. Some are better than others, but certainly if you are on the side of whole grain, you're not going to go far wrong. So a lot of your energy comes from these. Then we'll move quickly on, because I can't spend too much time here, on the fruit and veg. They are so important for physical and mental well-being, and we'll talk about each of these in a little bit more detail later. 5 portions, I think we all know that, 5 portions a day of fruit and veg. However, I would say at least 1 to 2 portions of fruit and limitless vegetables. 5 is probably too few, but it's fruit and veg together. Remember, the fruit are simple sugars, so they hit the blood quite quickly, although the fact that they are still intrinsic sugars, i.e. in their cells, helps you get the goodness of the fibre and everything else with them, so don't cut down too much. And they certainly provide unique vitamins. So moving down to the smaller section, so you remember you've got your protein was 15 to 20%. These are the main sources. The pink and blue are the main sources of your protein, pink in particular. interestingly enough, they start with the vegetarian, the plant-based sources, beans, pulses, less fatty sources of protein. You don't get as much in each serving, but it's perfectly possible and doable to get the right proportions of protein in your diet as a vegetarian, particularly, or as a vegan. You should be eating 2 to 3 portions a week of lean, of fish in particular, and at least one of those should be an oily fish. The oily fishes, tuna, salmon, mackerel, herring, are good for omega-3, which we'll also talk about in a bit. The second, then we talk about a little bit about milk. Dairy products are really important for gut health in particular. And the non-dairy alternatives aren't naturally as good as dairy, but they are fortified in most regards to make sure you get the calcium and the other micronutrients that the dairy provides. So, and they are so prolific. You can get milk made of anything these days. So that's good. I'm going to rush past this because, as I said, you get most of your fat from those 2 groups. This is just a little bit of added. I guess the rule for that is try and keep it liquid. Saturated fats tend to be solid at room temperature. So if you're going to fry in something, fry in oil as opposed to margarine. A little bit about these, only because they're going to feature later on. These are the treats. Not saying don't eat a biscuit ever again, but I am saying eat less often and in small amounts, or at least the government says that. I love that phrase. I think it just basically says it all, really. These are your crisps, high fat, sugar, high, the biscuits, cakes, high sugar. They're not part of the main diet, which is the overall, but they're not excluded. Quickly, a little bit about hydration. I can't understate the importance in terms of transporting vitamins around the body. It provides hydration. Obviously, it's important for the kidney function and the need to remove waste. It lubricates and regulates body temperature, as we all know, but we still don't drink enough. So that's the whirlwind tour of the Eat Well guys. I spent about a week on this with my clients because it's difficult to get in, but it's really healthy to print out and pin on your fridge or cupboard. Right, so what I wanted to do for the rest of the time is actually go back to those groups that we've talked about and talk a little bit about their direct links with mental health. As I said, some of it is weak or just unresearched. But there are definitely links. So we start again with the fruit and vegetables. As I said, vitamins and minerals, they in terms of our happy hormones, the serotonin and dopamine, they need certain vitamins to be able to be built. They're built by the body, largely from proteins. But the vitamins and minerals we get from food provide the environment that can happen in. And there are some enzymes that the body naturally produces that actually inhibit the production of these things. And fruit and veg are very helpful in actually fighting those enzymes. A little bit complicated, but eat fruit and veg, I think is the message. They provide antioxidants. A, C, and E are the vitamins of antioxidants, if anyone wants to know that much. They protect against damage to cells and tissue, including brain cells and tissue, caused by what are called free radicals, which sound like a lot of fun, actually. I'd like to meet a free radical. But they are just unstable molecules and they cause damage. It includes brain tissue. So there's got to be a link there. Antioxidants are a great thing, and we need them, obviously. Fruit and veg are high in vitamins A and C, both antioxidants. And they provide fibre for gut health. We can't overstate the amount of fibre. It's basically, people should be eating 30 grams a day. Most people don't, because they don't eat their fibre a day, typically. We've already talked about the association with gut health and mental health. Fibre also regulates sugar. It stops the sugar hitting the blood so quickly, so regulates. And obviously iron there for dark green veg is a good source of iron. We'll talk a little bit more about irons when we talk about proteins, because largely we get them from protein. Starchy carbs, again, as we've said, the main source of energy, and as I've said already, fibre can't be overstated. So the slower release of sugar to the blood is kind of what we're looking for. Also from a physical aspect, it keeps us fuller for longer. If you can't tolerate gluten, there seem to be more and more people that can't now. As I've said, some choices are better than others in this food group. And that's true for mental as well as physical health. But fruit and veg, and obviously, but there is oats, whole grain rice, sweet potatoes are great sources of fibre and vitamins without the gluten. Right, I need to change slide. So here we go with the proteins. This is another little bit of science, I suppose. Proteins are really important, as we've already said, for physical, and it turns out for mental health. So again, back to our neurotransmitters. There are 20 amino acids, which are what proteins are constructed of. When you break down proteins, they turn into amino acids. There are 20 of them. 8 of them we have to eat because the body can't make them. And the body needs certain of these amino acids to build our neurotransmitters. Specifically tryptophan for serotonin and tyrosine for dopamine. So we need these amino acids to make them. Tryptophan is an essential one, which means it's one of the ones we have to eat. You can't make tryptophan. So eggs, tofu, and other soy products contain both of those. So proteins are really good. Eggs in particular are a fantastic source of protein. They contain fat, virtually no carbs. Fish and lean meat are, again, really important nutrients. We can talk about iron here, and they are a really good source of the B vitamins, which are the water-based vitamins, which are fundamental to good mental health. Iron is absolutely essential for energy. It keeps the blood oxygenated. And we know, most people know, that a deficiency leads to anemia. And what's anemia? At the end of the day, it's fatigue. So a deficiency in iron will lead to tiredness and low mood. I don't think there's any dispute in that. Where do we get our iron? I think we all know it's the main source is red meat, but also the dark leafy vegetables, and all the plant-based proteins tend to be fairly high in iron. Edamame beans is a good example. The B vitamins that I talked about also in fish and lean meats help metabolize our carbohydrates and proteins, so they have an important role in energy, obviously in the structural and in hormone production. So all of those are going to affect our mental health. Fish in general is really beneficial, hence the advice to eat it twice a week. There's been some evidence between fish consumption and the reduction of symptoms of depression, but this is likely to be a correlation rather than a causal relationship, i.e. it could be 1,001 things about people's lifestyles that eat more fish that could help their mental well-being in terms of depression. So it's fairly weak, but not a bad thing to do anyway. Many benefits of eating fish, and again the oily fish for the omega-3, which leads me nicely onto fats. Omega-3, which is the oily fish, as we said. Our brain is made up of 60% fat. It says it all. We need to nourish it with the right type of fat. Omega-3 is an essential fatty acid in terms of the fat. Again, like the amino acids, we can't metabolite, we can't make them ourselves, we can't synthesize them within the body, so they have to be eaten. tends to be a problem for vegetarians, but there are sources I've discovered recently with vegetarian clients that chia seeds get you there. Have a teaspoon of chia seeds on your porridge and you'll get all the omega-3 you need. So omega-3 is an anti-inflammatory. We've talked about the importance of not inflaming the gut, of having a healthy gut. It has been linked with positive effects on the symptoms of depression. So again, I can't. Fish is really important, and as I said, if you don't eat fish, there are good sources, the nuts and the seeds. So I think we've got the message on proteins and fats. Going on to dairy, one thing we probably haven't said, because it's specific to dairy, is the probiotics in yogurts, healthy good gut bacteria, all fermented food, yogurts, kefir, have a range of gut-loving bacteria. Gut inflammation is getting more attention in the scientific world now in relation to mental health, with links that good gut bacteria may improve resilience and reduce anxiety. Although a word of warning about dairy, it's saturated fat, so physically it's not great, but the 2 to 3 portions recommended is not going to do you any harm at all. And then finally, the eat less often and in small amounts category. These are basically, as we know, high sugar, high fats. They're going to hit the blood sugar really high. I haven't mentioned alcohol much, but, and I said I wasn't going to actually, but alcohol is even worse. Alcohol hits the blood sugar immediately, and then your body spends the next half hour or so trying to metabolize it and get rid of it. So you've got insulin spikes coming out. So again, it makes this sugar high and low even worse. As we know, we feel happy and then we feel sad and fall asleep. So it's quite obvious with alcohol. Sugar does the same thing. The easily digestible sugars do that. Clearly, this affects our mood. The steadier your blood sugar level, the more stable and balanced you will feel. We talked about it conversely with the high fiber, starchy carbohydrates. With the sugar, you get the opposite. However, there is some good news in this category, not for me, but for most people. Dark chocolate has many benefits. I'm told, because I don't eat chocolate at all, but I'm told that you have to eat it in small amounts because it's quite rich, so you can't eat a whole bar of dark chocolate. I got a thumbs up from Jo then. She obviously likes chocolate. So dark chocolates contain the chemicals that can boost your mood, in particular magnesium, which definitely helps relax the nervous system. Stress takes magnesium away, and again, like the healthy gut bacteria, we need the magnesium to deal with the stress. So all these things are a bit circular. Just wanted to return to the other side of the balance before we go. Back to the balance, the physical activity side. This is the only controllable bit of how we use our energy. So you take the message from that. Government guidelines are 30 minutes of moderate activity at least 5 times a week. Increase it as much as you can. If you're not able to, just listen to your body, but try not to be sedentary for long periods. So as soon as we finish this, you should be going and walking at least around the house, if not around the office or around the garden. Exercise is really, really important for mood. It does help reduce the symptoms of depression and anxiety, at least the symptoms of it. It might not affect the cause, but it certainly affects the symptoms. I can't, again, overstate the amount of activity that you should do. It doesn't have to be anything too strenuous. Walking, housework, gardening, all count. Anything that makes you a little bit out of breath, not too much. And finally, we are running out of time, but I've tried to just here on this one, bring out some of the really good moods for foods for the moods that we feel. Most of them, I think we've already talked about. Focus and motivation, so that's your protein. Eggs obviously fall in that category. Avocados and almonds are really good. Avocados also reduce inflammation. It's a really good fat. And almonds, vitamin B and magnesium, which we've already talked about. The mood, the chicken and turkey, lean meats, we've talked a lot about, so I won't repeat myself. But I haven't mentioned turmeric and any herbs and spices. Herbs and spices are a great way of livening up maybe your not so palatable foods that you want to eat. Really make cooking far more interesting. And turmeric itself has some links with easing depression. It's certainly an anti-inflammatory. So there you go, get cooking Indian meals. For the energy lift, berries, I haven't talked about berries, they're probably the best type of food to eat. If you can't get them all year round, frozen are just as good as fresh, if not better in some instances. So fill your plate with berries. Again, good start to the day with some seeds and some porridge. It's a fantastic start to the day for physical and mental well-being. Bananas actually do contain a lot of tryptophan, again, so leading to serotonin production. And I can't talk more highly in favour of oats. I've myself introduced them to my diet recently, and they are a great source of energy. They keep going till lunchtime. Less stress. I've just been binged, haven't I? Is that to tell me that I need to finish? Which I'm just about to do, because the less stress we've already talked about. Thank you for listening. I'm sure there's loads of questions, but I can't see the chat.
We do have questions, Nikki. So if you want to stop share, I will go through some of the questions. Thank you.
Right. So shall I stop share?
Yeah, stop share.
Stop share.
So Pamela Shabby asked, how important is it to supplement your diet with vitamin tablets? And then Annie said, do you believe supplementation is beneficial, but particularly given that a lot of food produced these days are grown in nutrient-poor soil and exposed in a large number of pesticides and herbicides?
Yep, good point. Our consumption of minerals isn't about what we eat, but it's about the quality of the soil, so good point. I would say you should still, at least in this country, be able to get your fair share of vitamins and adequate proportions from the food you eat. The only exception is vitamin D, which is the sunlight vitamin, which should be supplemented up to 10 micrograms, which is 1/1,000,000th of a gram, by the way. So watch it if you are going to get it. But government recommendations are that everyone should supplement between the months of September to March, basically the winter months, because your ability to get vitamin D from the sun is obviously not very good during the winter.
Thank you. So we also had a question from Adi. Can you please suggest on planet or plant-based sources to protein, B12 and omega-3?
B12 is a difficult one. It's largely from animal sources. It is a difficult one. You tend to get it from cereals seem to be fortified with it, which is probably a good source. And some of the alternative milks seem to be fortified with it. Otherwise, it's a problem, B12, for vegetarians, particularly vegans. But there are great sources of protein, which also will have the B12 in terms of the ones you know if you're a vegetarian. The pulses, the chickpeas are amazing. Any of the lentils, beans themselves, even baked beans on toast is a very nutritious meal, providing you get the low sugar, low salt variety, which Heinz produces now. So you can have a perfectly balanced diet in terms of that. You're right, B12 is an issue, but a lot of the foods that vegetarians eat in terms of alternatives will be supplemented with it.
And then we've had a question from Zach Newman. Should we be eating organic fruit and veg or free range chicken and meat, wild fish?
I never know the answer to this question. I'm asked it frequently and I really ought to do some research, but I think obviously if it's coming from better soil, that helps the minerals, as I've already said. I guess we don't want to be eating pesticides that might come from non-organic. We don't know how it's been treated. So there's got to be some health benefits. I really am not sure though, in terms of the nutrients comparison between organic and non-organic. I think they probably compare much the same, apart from, as I say, the mineral quality.
And he also actually advised, what advice if lactose intolerant?
Lactose intolerance, what advice?
Yeah.
Don't drink milk. So, sorry, that was a bit flippant, wasn't it? Yeah, again, the dairy alternatives, lactose comes from dairy sources mainly. There are some great dairy alternatives now. It also helps for kosher cooking, because anything marked vegan is obviously hasn't got milk in it. So I found that a lot easier in recent years. But yes, a lot of those are really good these days. As I said, they're fortified with the things you're going to miss out from not consuming dairy. And I think that's the answer, really.
And somebody, Julia said, could you put your email and web details on the chat?
I displayed the last slide. It's got all my details on it. I quickly displayed it. I didn't expect you to memorize it, but I think, Jo, you're sending out the slides anyway.
Yeah, so there we are. And then one final question before we leave is, obviously, complex carbohydrates, you know, you did say that it was a good food, but we're so often told in a diet to kind of cut down on carbs. So which ones are the best ones to eat? Because
I think I've actually covered this one actually. To my mind, porridge oats are by far the best, because they've got quite a lot of protein in as well, and lots of vitamins in particular. So porridge is fantastic. In terms of balancing your macros, if you want to lose weight, there's a lot of talk about reducing your carbs. I'd say change them. Try and keep to the 50% or just slightly below, but go for the sweet potato and the vegetarian based ones, and your porridge again, and brown rice. Certainly cut out anything white. Not a great fan of pasta, even if it is brown, because it tastes so revolting. But yeah, make your choices. Oats is certainly a really good source. Sweet potatoes I'm a big fan of. They all contain fibre. You don't have to have the wheat. But yes, there's a school of thought about just balancing your macros. If you need to reduce your carbohydrates for any reason, it can be done, but I wouldn't go too far. I can't stress enough the need for the energy for physical and again mental well-being.
And a quick final, because she's asked it twice, about what about red meat? Pamela asks.
Red meat should be limited. We know the association with saturated fat, which has a strong association with coronary heart disease. I've said, in the presentation, I said lean meats, and I talked about chicken and turkey. Preferable by far, still saturated fat, but leaner, so you don't get as much of it. Red meat, I would almost put in the eat less, not from in small amounts, but I guess a steak or whatever every couple of weeks isn't going to do anyone any harm, and it does have a lot of iron in.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Nicky. Really, really appreciate your insight and advice and tips. We're going to cut off now, and I think if there's any more, Nicky, I think you're staying around for our question and answer.
Yes, I can do that.
So we're going to move on to that now, if everybody wants to move on to the final session. Thank you very, very much indeed, Nicky. Really appreciate it.